Welcome to Lady Mythos. This is the Norse creation myth, and it's very different from what you might expect. Most creation stories begin with something peaceful. Light, silence, maybe even a god with a plan. This one doesn't. Because in Norse mythology, the world doesn't start with order. It starts with a gap. A vast, empty space called Ginnungagap. Not calm, not quiet, just waiting. And on either side of that void, two things already existed: fire and ice. They were never meant to meet. But eventually, they did. And when they touched, something came alive. Not a god, not a hero. Something older. Something that wasn't supposed to exist at all. And here's the part that makes this story different from almost every other myth. The 9 realms, Asgard, Midgard, all of it. They weren't carefully created. They were built from the aftermath of that first mistake. From something that had to be killed just to make the world possible. So the real question isn't how everything began. It's this: if your entire world was built on something broken, would you even notice before it starts to fall apart? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, take a second to like the video. It genuinely helps the channel grow. And if you want more journeys like this, you already know what to do. Obviously, subscribe and tell me in the comments which mythical journey you'd like us to explore next together. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Not to the gods, not to the world, but to the moment where nothing should have existed, and yet something did. Chapter 1. The Void, Ginnungagap. So, we go back to the beginning. Not the beginning you're used to. There's no sky yet, no ground beneath anything, no gods watching over it. Just space. Endless, stretching in every direction. The Norse called it Ginnungagap. And when people hear void, they imagine silence, stillness, nothing happening. But this wasn't that kind of nothing. This was unstable, like something unfinished, like a place that shouldn't exist on its own. Because here's what makes it strange. Ginnungagap wasn't alone. Before anything was created, before any god shaped the world, there were already 2 realms. On one side, there was Muspelheim, a place of constant flame. Not just fire like we know it. This was raw heat, moving, alive in a way that didn't feel safe. You don't stand in Muspelheim. You survive it, if you can. And on the other side, there was Niflheim. Cold, but not quiet. Thick mist, frozen rivers, ice that didn't just sit there. It spread, crept, expanded. A slow kind of danger. So before the world, before life, you already have 2 extremes. Fire that consumes, ice that suffocates. And between them, this gap, waiting. Now here's where things start to shift. Because these two realms, they didn't stay separate forever. The heat from Muspelheim began to push outward. The frost from Niflheim began to creep forward. Slow at first, then closer, closer, until eventually they touched. And when they did, the ice didn't just melt, it changed. Drops began to fall into Ginnungagap. Not water as we know it, something thicker, heavier. And those drops didn't disappear into the void. They gathered. They clung together. They started forming something alive. Imagine that for a second. There's still no sky, no ground, no sense of up or down. Just darkness. And in the middle of it, something slowly taking shape. Breathing, before breath should even exist. That was the first life. And it didn't arrive gently. It forced its way into existence. And here's the part that should make you pause. Nothing created it. No god spoke it into being. No plan guided it. It just happened. Out of heat and frost, colliding in a place that wasn't meant to hold anything. Which means, from the very beginning, life didn't come from order. It came from pressure, from imbalance, from something going wrong. And if that's how the first being was born, what does that say about everything that comes after? Because that shape in the darkness, it's still forming, still growing. And in the next moment, you're going to see it clearly for the first time. And when you do, you'll understand why the gods had no choice but to kill it. Let's keep going. Chapter 2. The First Being, YMIR. So those drops in the void, they don't disappear. They gather, and something begins to take shape. Not suddenly, slowly, like it's forcing itself into existence. A body forms where there's no ground to stand on. Limbs stretch out into empty space, and then it breathes. This is YMIR, the first being. And this is the part most people miss. Nothing created him. He just happened. And nothing about him feels intentional. He wasn't created. He wasn't chosen. He's just the result of fire and ice colliding in the wrong place. And almost immediately, things start getting worse. Because YMIR doesn't stay alone. While he sleeps, more life comes out of him. From beneath one arm, two figures form. From his legs, another. No effort, no control. It just happens. These are the first giants, the Jotnar. And now, in a world with no structure, no boundaries, they begin to multiply. That's the first real shift. Because now this isn't just one mistake, it's spreading. And there's still nothing to stop it. No gods, no rules, just growth in the dark. But even something like YMIR needs to survive. And that's when something else appears. Not violent, not chaotic. Almost calm. A massive cow. Strange, yeah, but this part matters. Because while Ymir feeds from her, she does something else. Something quiet. She turns to the ice and begins to lick it, slowly, repeatedly. At first, nothing happens. Then, shapes start to show beneath the surface. Something trapped inside the ice. Not another giant, something different. And as she keeps going, that shape starts to break free. Because while chaos is spreading in one direction, something else is about to emerge in the other. And when it finally emerges, it won't be another giant. It will be the first god. And that's where the balance begins to shift. Chapter 3. The First God, Búri. So while the giants are multiplying in the dark, something else is being uncovered. Not quickly, not all at once. The cow, Olthumla, keeps licking the ice, hour after hour. Nothing dramatic happens at first, but then a shape starts to show. Not a giant, not something twisted or unstable like Ymir. This is different. First, a face, then shoulders, then the full form of a man, emerging from the ice itself. This is Búri, the first of the gods. And unlike Ymir, Búri doesn't feel accidental. There's something controlled about him, like he belongs to a different kind of existence entirely. Now, we don't get much about him in the myths. No long story, no dramatic scenes. But what matters is what comes next. Because Búri doesn't stay alone. He has a son, Bor. And Bor does something that changes everything. He forms a connection with the giants. He takes a wife, a giant named Bestla. And from that union, something new is born. Not fully god, not fully giant. Something in between. 3 sons, Odin, Vili, Ver. Now this is where things start to get serious, because up until now, everything has been uncontrolled. Ymir, the giants, life just spreading. But these 3, they're different. They think. They observe. They understand what's happening around them. And what they see is a problem. The giants are multiplying too fast. There's no balance, no structure, no future in a world like this. And that's the first time in this story someone makes a decision. Not to create, not to fix things, but to destroy something. Because Odin and his brothers realize something important. If Ymir stays alive, this chaos never stops. So they decide he has to die. Now think about that for a second. The first real act of the gods is not creation. It's murder. And not just any murder. They're about to kill the very thing everything came from. And when they do, it won't just end Ymir. It's going to change the entire shape of existence. Because what comes out of his death is the world itself. Chapter 4. The First Killing. So now, for the first time, something is about to be done on purpose. Up until this point, everything just happened. Ymir appeared. The giants spread. The world stayed shapeless. But Odin, along with Vili and Ve, they decide to act. They don't try to control Ymir. They don't try to guide anything. They go straight to the only option they can see. End it. They don't hesitate. They don't wait. They kill the first living thing to make the world possible. Now imagine the scale of this. There's still no proper world. No sky. No land to stand on. Just darkness and this massive, living presence. And the three of them move toward him. We're not given a long speech. No warning. No negotiation. They attack. And Ymir, for the first time, is no longer just existing. He's fighting. This isn't clean. It's not controlled. It's force against something that doesn't want to stop existing. But eventually, they overpower him. And when Ymir falls, everything changes. Because the moment he dies, his body doesn't just collapse. It breaks open. And what comes out of him is too much. Blood. Not a stream, not a pool, a flood. It pours into the void, spreading fast, faster than anything has moved so far in this story. And the giants, the ones that came from him, they can't escape it. Almost all of them are swept away, drowned in the same force that created them. Except for two. A giant named Bergelmir and his wife. They manage to get away, riding out the flood, and they don't disappear. They survive. Which means chaos isn't gone. It's just been pushed somewhere else. Now look at what's left. Ymir is dead. The giants are nearly wiped out, and the three brothers are standing there in the aftermath. And this is where the story could have stopped. They could have walked away, left everything as it was. But instead, they look at Ymir's body and see something else. Not a corpse. Potential. Because what they do next is take something dead and turn it into everything that will ever exist. And this time, they're not destroying. They're building. And the way they do it is not what you'd expect. Chapter 5. Building the World. So now, Ymir is gone. And what's left is his body. No sky above it, no land beneath it. Just a massive, lifeless form floating in the void. And instead of turning away, Odin, Vili, and Ve start shaping it. Not carefully, not gently. They take it apart. Piece by piece, they turn Ymir into something new. His flesh becomes land, solid ground for the first time. His blood spreads out into oceans and lakes, filling the emptiness around them. His bones are broken and set into place as mountains. His teeth shattered into stones and smaller rocks. Now there's structure. Not just space, but something you could stand on. Then they reach higher. They take his skull and lift it above everything. That becomes the sky. And to keep it from collapsing, they place 4 beings beneath it. The dwarves, Northri, Suthri, Ostri, Vestri, each one holding a corner. So when you look at the world, you're not looking at something created. You're looking at something rearranged. There's up, there's down, there are directions. Something that almost feels like a world. But it's still dark, still empty. So Odin and his brothers turn back toward Muspelheim. They take sparks, raw pieces of fire, and scatter them across the sky. Those become the stars. And suddenly, there's light. Not enough to make it safe, but enough to see. And when you look around now, you realize something important. Everything here came from Ymir. The ground, the water, the sky above it. Nothing is separate from him. Which means, even though he's gone, he's still everywhere. And that matters, because it means the world isn't clean. It isn't pure. It's built on something that had to be destroyed. And that kind of foundation doesn't stay stable forever. But right now, the gods aren't thinking about that. Because for the first time, they've created something that holds together. A place. And now, they need something to live in it. Because a world without life doesn't stay quiet for long. And what they create next is far more fragile than anything that came before. Chapter 6. The First Humans. So now, there's a world. Land you could stand on. Water moving through it. A sky held up above everything. But it's empty. No movement. No voices. Just a place. Waiting. And this is where Odin, Vili and Ve do something different. For the first time, they don't destroy anything. They don't reshape something that already exists. They create from nothing useful. They're walking along the edge of the sea, and they find 2 pieces of driftwood. Just logs, washed up, lifeless, nothing special. And somehow, that's enough. They pick them up, and each of the brothers gives something to them. Odin gives breath, life. Vili gives awareness, the ability to think, to feel. Ve gives form, faces, speech, the ability to see and hear. And just like that, there's 2 lifeless pieces of wood. Aren't wood anymore. They're alive. The first humans. Ask and Embla. Now stop for a second. Everything up to this point, giants, gods, the world itself, came from something massive, something violent, something overwhelming. And now, you have this. 2 beings that can be broken. They don't control anything. They don't shape the world. They just exist inside it. which makes them vulnerable. Because the world they've been placed into is not empty. The giants still exist. Remember, YMIR and his wife survived the flood. They didn't disappear. They rebuilt. Out there, beyond where humans now stand, something older is still alive. And the gods know it. So they don't just leave humans exposed. They build something around them, a boundary, a kind of protection. This becomes Midgard. Not the whole world, just a section of it. Enclosed, separated. Because humans aren't meant to face everything else directly. Not yet. And maybe not ever. Now think about what that means. From the very beginning, humans are placed inside a world with something kept out. And the only reason that boundary exists is because something dangerous is still out there. Something that hasn't been dealt with. And this is where the story quietly shifts again. Because now, it's not just about creation. It's about separation. Gods above. Humans in the middle. Something else outside. And once those lines are drawn, the rest of the 9 realms begin to take shape around them. And when you see how they're all connected, you start to realize something unsettling. This world isn't divided by accident. It's divided because it has to be. Chapter 7. The 9 Realms. So now, the world isn't just one place. It's divided, layered, connected, but not equal. At the center of everything, there's a structure holding it all together. A tree. Not a normal tree. Yggdrasil. Its roots go deep. Its branches stretch across everything. Every realm connected to it. And now, those realms start to take form. At the highest level, there's Asgard. This is where the Aesir gods live. Odin rules here, watching everything below. It's not peaceful. It's controlled. Built for power and for war. Connected to it, but separate, is Vanaheim. A different kind of gods. Older, tied to nature, growth, fertility. They don't think the same way as Odin, and that difference will matter later. Then there's Midgard, the human world. Closed off, protected, but exposed at the same time. Because Midgard isn't alone. Right next to it, there's Jotunheim. This is where the giants live, the ones that survived, the ones that never forgot what happened to Ymir, and they haven't forgiven it. Below all of this, there's something colder. Niflheim still exists, and within it, a darker place forms. Helheim, ruled by Hel. This is where the dead go, not warriors, not heroes, just everyone else. And once you're there, you don't come back. Then there's Muspelheim, still burning, still waiting, ruled by Surtur. He doesn't move yet, but when he does, it won't be small. And beneath the surface, hidden in darkness, there's Nidavellir. The dwarves live here. They build weapons, tools, things the gods will rely on. But they're not loyal, not really. Then there's Alfheim, bright, distant. Not much is said about them, and that alone makes them unpredictable. Now stop for a second. Look at this structure. Gods above, humans in the middle, giants nearby, the dead below, fire waiting on one side, ice on the other. Everything has a place. Everything is separated, and that answers part of the question. Why divide the world like this? Because putting everything together wouldn't work. Too much conflict, too much history, too many things that don't belong near each other. So the gods didn't just create a world, they contained it. They built distance between things that would destroy each other if they got too close. But here's the problem. They're all still connected through Yggdrasil, which means if something starts to break, it won't stay in one place. It will spread. And the first signs of that are already there. Because not everything in this world is staying where it should. Chapter 8. It starts breaking. So everything is in place. Realms separated, gods above, humans contained. It looks stable, but it isn't. Because almost immediately, things start moving where they shouldn't. Look up. The sky isn't calm. The sun and the moon, they don't move freely. They're being chased. Two wolves, Skjöl and Hati. They don't stop. They don't slow down. And one day, they will catch what they're chasing. So even time itself is being hunted. Now look at Midgard. It's surrounded by ocean. Looks like protection. It isn't. Because in that ocean, something is already there. Jörmungandr. A serpent so large, it wraps around the entire world, holding its own tail. And it doesn't stay still. It tightens, slowly, almost like it's waiting. Now go deeper. Below the roots of Yggdrasil, there's something else. Something that doesn't belong to the gods. Nidhogg, a dragon. It doesn't attack the realms directly. It does something worse. It chews at the roots, constantly. Quiet damage, the kind you don't notice until something collapses. And above, there's tension too. In Asgard, they're not relaxed. They're preparing, because they know something is coming. Even Heimdall stands watch constantly, not resting, not leaving, waiting. Now think about that. The gods built this world. They shaped it. They divided it. And even they don't trust it. Because everything that was pushed away, the giants, the fire, the dead, it's all still there, still connected, still moving. And none of it has been resolved. So now we come back to the question. If the world was built to hold everything apart, why does it already feel like it's coming back together? Because the truth is, it never stopped. The chaos that YMIR came from It didn't disappear when he died. It spread into the sea, into the sky, into the roots of the world itself. And now, it's slowly working its way back out. Which means this world was never built to last. And the gods know it. So the real story isn't just how the world was created. It's why it was always going to end. Chapter 9. The Truth. So now, we can finally answer the question. If everything was built from chaos, was it ever meant to survive? Look at how it started. Fire and ice collide. Ymir comes into existence. Not created, not planned. Then the gods arrive. Odin, Vili, they, and the first thing they do is kill. Not out of cruelty, out of necessity. And from that, everything else is built. That's the story, but that's not the truth behind it. Because if you step back and look at everything together, a pattern starts to show. Nothing in this world was created clean. The first life wasn't planned. Ymir wasn't designed. He forced his way into existence. The first act of the gods wasn't creation. It was killing. And the world itself isn't separate from that. It's built directly from it. The land you stand on used to be something alive. The ocean came from blood. The sky is part of a body that was torn apart. So when you ask, why does everything feel unstable? That's your answer. Because the foundation of this world is violence. Now look at everything that came after. The giants weren't removed, they survived. Bergelmir and his kind are still out there. The fire of Muspelheim was never put out. The cold of Niflheim never stopped spreading. And the creatures inside the world, they all carry that same instability. Jormungandr doesn't protect Midgard, it traps it. Nidhogg doesn't attack loudly, it weakens everything slowly. Even the sky isn't safe, because Skull and Hati are still running, and they don't stop. So when you put all of that together, you start to see it clearly. The gods didn't remove chaos. They reorganized it. They pushed it into different places, gave it names, built walls around it. But it's still there, everywhere. And that leads to the final truth. This world was never meant to last forever. Not because the gods failed, but because of what they started with. You can't build something stable out of something that was never stable to begin with. And that's why everything in this story points in one direction. Not growth, not peace, an ending. And the Norse didn't hide that. They gave it a name. Ragnarok. And when it comes, it won't feel sudden. Because in a world like this, the end doesn't arrive out of nowhere. It's been there from the very beginning. Epilogue. What comes next? And that is where this story leaves us. From nothing to something, to a world built on something that was never stable to begin with. If you stayed with me all the way through, genuinely, thank you. These stories aren't meant to be rushed. They're meant to be experienced. So whether you were listening with your eyes closed or following every moment, I'm glad you were here for it. And one thing to keep in mind, what you've just heard, this is only the beginning. This is how the 9 realms were created. But in Norse mythology, creation is only half the story. Because everything we've talked about, the gods, the giants, the world itself, it doesn't last. And that ending doesn't come out of nowhere. It begins quietly, with a loss. The death of Baldur. A moment that seems small at first, but changes everything that follows. And then, it grows into something the gods can't contain, a force they tried to control and failed. Fenrir. And when those 2 moments connect, the loss and the breaking, you get what the Norse always knew was coming. Ragnarok. If you want to understand how this world actually ends, and how everything we've talked about leads into it, I've already told those stories. The fall of Baldur, the rise of Fenrir. You'll find them linked here. And trust me, after everything you've just heard, you'll see those stories very differently. If this kind of storytelling is something you enjoy, slow, immersive, and a little darker, make sure you're subscribed. And I'd like to hear from you. What stayed with you the most? Was it Ymir, the first killing, or the idea that this world was never stable to begin with? Let me know in the comments. And next time, we won't be starting at the beginning. We'll step inside one of these realms and see what actually lives there. For now, close your eyes, take a slow breath, and let the story settle. Yours, Lady Mythos.